You searched for more. You wanted to become the best version of yourself. Your search is over. And the technology finally exists. To go beyond limits. Your time has come. Unleash your potential. AQ. Adaptive Intelligence.
Welcome everyone. If you're watching on the live stream right now and you'd like to join in and actually interact with our new guest, feel free to click in the description below, RSVP and join into our event. You'll get an email that sends out the invitation to join in to our Discord. So go ahead and do that before we get started, or do that right now so you don't miss out. So welcome to AQ Adaptive Intelligence. Our discussion today is titled Adaptive Connecting and Conscious Relationships. So our special guest for today is Giovanna Elias, and she's a communications expert. And no, I don't mean the telecom communication, I mean communicating with other humans. So a little bit about Giovanna. She excels at doing coaching and group coaching. She's really great at events, and you could probably catch her at some of the events that she does all over the world. Like I mentioned, she's great at one-on-one and group sessions, and she's been known to do it all over the place. The beauty of what she does is that she can, like many traveling nomads, do it from anywhere. And so she's here today online to talk to us about how to communicate with other humans. She, like I mentioned, loves to travel, and she's been taking her dance skills all over the globe, namely Africa just recently. She went to Uganda and now is in Kenya, so we'll be able to ask her a little bit about what that's like. And if you're lucky, you might just catch her at one of our healing retreats or different AQ events that we host also all over the world. And so our topic today is adaptive connecting and conscious relationships. And without further ado, I'll bring to you Giovanna Elias at AQ Adaptive Intelligence. All right, Giovanna, let's go.
Love it. Hey there, Gabriel. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So thank you for, being patient today. I know we're running a little bit later than usual, but how are you today? And how was your trip to Africa? I actually ended up almost going to Africa once, but at the last minute it got changed, and I went to Jamaica. It was for a mission trip, and then that totally changed my life. But I'm curious what Africa is like, especially the places that you've been to.
So I initially came to Rwanda for a wedding, a friend of mine's wedding, and then I figured since I've traveled over 25 hours to get here, I might as well actually explore other parts of Africa. So stayed about 5 weeks in Rwanda, moseyed over to Uganda, was only supposed to stay a week and ended up staying 3 months. And now I've been less than a week in Kenya. So far it's actually been a beautiful surprise. The amount of just incredible people I've met, and also fascinating people. There's a lot of people in Africa coming from all around the globe to do a lot of development work, because there's so much opportunity here in Africa to do lots of different type of development. Of course, there's lots of resources here as well. So I've just been meeting lots of different people from lots of different places around the world doing so many different types of jobs that I never even knew existed until being here, and some really intelligent, bright minds. So it's been fascinating, needless to say, and certainly not what I expected.
Out of curiosity, what's been your most memorable moment so far in Africa?
Oh, oh, this is a very good question, actually. And I say the same thing about relationships as I would to this question. I don't think that it's this grand thing that we do in life or here for me or in our relationships that makes us deeply connect or fall in love with a place or a person. I think it's the small incremental things that has us feel very strongly connected or bonded to a place or a person. So I would say for me, it's not like this one grand thing that I did that I was like, whoa, that was life changing. I actually think what's been most important for me is, of course, me being a dancer, going to the dance community, 2, 3, 4 times a week, or even teaching. Like I started teaching classes here on a weekly basis and building really strong connections with the locals here has been the most meaningful thing for me. And I think it's the same thing again in relationships. It's not like, oh, my husband or my wife or my partner or, my colleague or whoever it is did that one big grand thing for me. I think it's more like, oh, wow, they thought about me, they considered me in this moment, or they brought home flowers, or, oh, my wife cooked a really nice dinner because she knew I had a long day, whatever it is. But those small details actually amount to, a much deeper, stronger relationship. So I think it was just me being with the community here every day almost, and dancing that's kind of made it a really memorable experience for me to connect with the people.
So let me ask you, because this is probably, somebody clicked on this video and they want to know the secret to communicating, the secret to building these great relationships, and you're saying it's the little things. And I know in our previous conversations you mentioned a 9-key system. What is that 9-key system?
Yeah. Yeah, so I have a 9-key system that I've created called the Connection Code. And, moving through these 9 keys, you can both build meaningful relationships, meaningful connections with people. And this can look like breaking the ice and just meeting someone for the very first time, both in a professional and a personal setting. And it can expand all the way to, okay, now that you have these relationships, what do you do with them? How do you actually go layers deeper? And of course, then conflicts can also arise in our relationships. So how do we work through them and resolve them, again, on a professional and a personal basis? So, I mean, just to give you an idea, very first key is curiosity. And I always say that curiosity is so important, both within ourselves and with the people that we are with. So we need to ask ourselves meaningful questions and understand who we are and what's valuable and important and meaningful for us. And of course, then we can share that with the people that are in our lives. But of course, we also want to ask meaningful questions to the people we share space with. That way we know who we are doing business with or making friends with or getting involved in a romantic relationship with. And we know that we're aligned and in the right direction. I see so many people physically sharing space, but they don't really know who they're in the presence with. It's just, it could be any other human being with them. So I sort of have a funny story, but I don't know if I'm going to share this one right now.
Oh, I kind of want to hear it now.
I will simply say this. I have far too often seen men approach women and say, hey, let's go to the movies, for example, or, Netflix and chill. This is one of the, I'm trying to sound very diplomatic here, but honestly, it's one of the worst possibilities or worst choices that one person could make, because how do you know that person? How do you get to know someone if you have to sit in silence and watch a movie? You don't get to know who they are, what they're thinking, or what their beliefs are, their values, or anything of that nature. You want to actually either do an activity with them or sit down over dinner or drinks or something, but something that can allow that engagement. So I see this a lot. I also see businesses go awry because they got involved with the wrong business partner and in the end discovered that they can't really trust that person. And I said, did you do your homework right? Like, did you ask the right questions to understand the person that you're going into business with or you're going into marriage with? Like these are important things that we invest our time and energy and attention in. And yet we don't seem to really genuinely get to know the person that we are partnering up with.
I see. So it's almost like you have to do your own kind of like vetting process, but also like an
Yes.
engaged vetting process at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. And I love that you use the word engaged because many people think a vetting process is strictly intellectual, and on some level, very much so it is. Like, are you asking quality questions to that person and able to filter based on that? But it's also very much energetic. And what I mean by this is, and I'm sure all of us have experienced this before, where you walk into a space and you're like, wow, I'm really drawn to that person. Like, there's something about that person that's calling my attention. I would love to talk to them. They seem intriguing. And there's also the opposite where you walk into a space and you're like, oh, there's something about that, the energy of that person, it's so heavy or dense or down or whatever it is. I don't really want to be around that. And so we need to also acknowledge that and listen to that. That's also information, that's also data points. And if we dismiss that, then we could be creating, greater conflicts long term.
So is it true then what they say about first impressions? Because, maybe your energy is off like one day and then it just kind of like throws it all off for somebody like maybe you would have gotten along great with. But then maybe the opposite might happen, right? Like maybe you're having like a great day for whatever reason, you bump into somebody that maybe you shouldn't get along with, and just because of the matter of the energy, it's like it creates the attraction and or the repulsion.
Yeah, I love this question too. I talk a lot about data points. So I don't think that we can just base a whole interaction off of one moment or one instant, which would be considered one data point. We need to experience a multitude of different conversations in different environments, different moods with somebody to then be able to build up a variety of data points to then say, yeah, this really aligns with me, or no, it doesn't align so much with me. Now, with that being said, I do think, of course, the more we refine the skill, like people skills and being able to read people, then I think, of course, we'd be able to pick up on things a lot faster. And I also think it's extremely important that we are mindful of how we show up in any interaction, because the energy that we put forward is going to impact the conversation and the interaction with somebody else. And so we then have to take responsibility for how we're showing up, because of course that's going to have a ripple effect on that conversation, that interaction with the other person as well.
So let me ask you a bit of a existential question, if you will. So is the is it determined? Meaning like if you're in a good mood and that other person's in a good mood, is it like just determined that you guys are gonna get along, or versus like are there some people where no matter what mood you're in, they're just never gonna like you, or they'll never, you know what I'm saying? Like, is it determined
Yeah.
in that regard, or is there things that you can do? Is there principles where you can get along with anyone and communicate well with anyone, no matter what the circumstances?
You can get along with anybody, I believe, if you're very conscious of how you're showing up. And getting along with someone doesn't mean they're going to be your people. So there's a very big distinction. I can walk into any space with anyone, anywhere, at any time, and I am very intentional about how I leave somebody feeling. And I think all human beings should operate this way. What is the feeling I want to leave you with at the end of this interaction? And of course, I want to leave you feeling maybe uplifted or gaining some sort of insight, or whatever it may be. But it's some sort of you know higher vibration. With that being said, I may walk away from the conversation and be like, I'm glad I left something good for you. Not to say I can't take away something great from the conversation too, but I may know, like, if if I don't ever revisit that conversation, or if I don't develop a deeper relationship with that person, I'm also okay with that. And it's because I may just once again filter through the conversation, gaining data points that we may have very different interests, or we may have very different values or very different perspectives on life. And that's totally fine. There's no good or bad, right or wrong. It's just that we may totally look at life from such different filters that I may not want to have to necessarily, or invest my time and energy into that type of relationship, but I can still leave feeling good and having you feeling good. So, and I'm gonna, this might be a controversial conversation, but I'm gonna say
Let's
it
go for
anyways.
it. I like controversial.
So, for example, the girl that braided my hair, she spent 7 hours braiding my hair. Of course, you get to know someone in 7 hours. And I was also doing my taxes at the same time. It was a very productive day.
Wow.
But the point of this conversation, she was very religious. And I am not religious. I'm not religious in the sense of I don't necessarily believe in dogma, and I don't necessarily follow any particular text for a variety of reasons. Other subject, we can get into that another day. However, I have my own beliefs, and I can recognize that people have their own beliefs, and I can respect them for their beliefs. And I don't necessarily feel the need to have to share mine, but we all walk around with our own beliefs and our filters on life. I knew that she was religious. And I knew that she spent maybe 5 to 6 days a week in church. Like, that is her life. That's what she shared with me. Now, I actually, on some strange level, have like a deep love for, I guess we can call it Jesus music. it's, and it's only because it's like so inspiring and passionate, and it's almost like classical, but like intense. And I knew she likes it too. So I'm like, you know what? You're at my house. You're here for 7 hours. Let me put on some like great, like passionate, inspiring Jesus music while I do my taxes, because I know you'll love it. And I totally don't mind. Now, am I going to maintain a relationship with this woman outside of doing my hair? No, because her life revolves around a church, and it revolves around Christianity. And I have so many beliefs around Christianity. I grew up Christian, and then I, developed my own thoughts around where Christianity came from and all of these different things. Again, this is not about making it right or wrong. This is me saying, I don't practice that anymore. And because I don't practice that anymore, I wouldn't necessarily build a very strong, deep relationship with this girl that lives in the church. So does that mean like she left my house? I was a very happy human being. I was inspired by Jesus music and had my hair done. She was really happy. I gave her some food. We had some good conversations. She also was listening to great music. Am I going to have a super close relationship with her moving forward? No. But did we walk away happy from the interaction? Yes. So what am I saying about all of this? We don't necessarily need to have the same values in life, and we may not necessarily align on a deepest level where I would want to give energy and time into that relationship. However, we can enjoy the interaction we have for whatever time it is that we have. And I think that's the point. And I think as humans, more and more nowadays, especially with the internet and post-COVID, people have been labeled or labeled themselves as, certain types of things, vaxxer, anti-vaxxer, this is just the most obvious one, but, it's like pro-climate change, anti-climate change, whatever it may be, but people are slotting themselves into categories, which creates division. And the point of this conversation for me is not to say like, oh, she's Christian and I'm not. It's more like she's a human being and I'm also a human being. And why can't we get along as human beings? And again, we don't need to be best friends, but we can respect each other as human beings. And so, and I would even encourage having conversations that might be controversial and challenging, but that require some sort of critical thinking. So in a most beautiful, ideal world, I would love that she had the ability to sit and talk to me about why I grew up Christian and moved away from it. And that's also not me saying, again, that it's right or wrong. It's just me saying there's a whole slew of information I learned as I grew up about Christianity that turned me away from it. Now, again, if it gives someone hope to wake up in the morning, then I say go for it. Like if that makes you a better person, do it. Again, it's not right or wrong. It's good for you. And something else is good for me. So I think humans need to be able to sit and say, okay, well, we don't actually necessarily agree on these basic things, but does it feel good for you? Like, are you a good person at the end of the day? Are you doing good for you and for humanity? Am I doing good for myself and for humanity? Great. Yes? Perfect. So let's go on our merry way.
Beautiful. So it sounds like no matter what the interaction is, your goal is not to be right like some people do. It's basically to find some way to be able to connect in a way that's genuine to the other person and also to yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
Does that sound like a good
Exactly.
summary of that? Awesome.
This is exactly what it is. Yeah.
Now, that can be a challenge sometimes because some people, can be a little bit pushy, or sometimes, like there is like a situation where it does matter who is right or wrong. It's like, say like if it's like a life or death situation, right? What do you do in those moments where it becomes way more challenging to do what you're talking about? Because like, braiding your hair and giving to Caesar what is Caesar's is one thing.
Yeah.
But like, like in the context of, like, say like a business partner or a relationship, when things are like rocky, like what's the secret then? Because people are a bit more on edge.
Understanding. So it is very hard to empathize for a human being or to recognize their perspective if we don't have a deeper sense of understanding of what is going on in their reality. Right? We all have our different filters on life, which means we're all looking with a different lens and we all have a different reality. My objective is to understand yours. So my objective is not to say, well, I believe this is the case and that's it, case closed. My objective is to say, okay, well, this is how you feel. So what's leading you to feel that way? What's making you feel that way? And unpacking, again, unraveling the onion to try and get to the core and understand what's there. You may walk away still not necessarily agreeing with the person, but at least you'll have a deeper sense of understanding. And when we understand someone on a deeper level, we also have a greater sense of emotional empathy for them. So, we are more open to listening because we see their humanity, we see their emotion, rather than it being, again, about an intellectual thing. It's not so much like you're right and I'm wrong. It's more about, well, how is this situation actually making you feel and what's leading you to feel that way? And did I contribute to this feeling or not? We're talking really broadly here. So it's a bit harder because I think it's easier when we give like specific examples. And
well, in your coaching, is there a specific example where this principle really was shining through?
Something that comes up for me, Gabriel, is like wills, like family wills. And this can be super complicated because, if the person that passed away didn't leave a clean will, let's say, or they did leave a will and it favored certain people in the family and not other people, that can be very difficult for family members because now, in a sense, they need to really be open to communicating consciously, clearly, compassionately about the whole dynamic of what is being left to every individual person in the family. And there's so many dynamics that can go into a will, for example. So I have seen it be that, one family member gets almost everything and another family member is left with very little, if not nothing, potentially. And then that means these two members need to be able to have a conscious conversation with each other where they're saying, hey, listen, this was the reality. Do you actually support it? Do you agree with it? Do you feel it's fair? Would you like to do something about it? Not because you have to, but because as a human being, you wish to, you feel it would be right to do so. And if at the end of the day, there's still, let's say, injustice and there's a lack of fairness that takes place in that situation, then the person that walks away with very little, if not nothing, let's say, at best, they can simply share from a very calm space because people are not receptive to anger. They would share, of course, I'm disappointed, I'm hurt. This is the outcome I would have obviously liked. And while I can't control this situation, I would hope that you would understand that this would be, what I would ideally like, or this would be helpful for me, and these are the reasons why. And you leave that person with that information. So I'm a very big believer in what I call planting seeds. And this might sound really, really bad, but it's much easier to impact or influence or manipulate, if we wish to use that word, a person when we make them feel disappointed rather than angry. So if I'm going to come at you with a deep, intensive sense of anger, you are not going to be receptive. You will not be open. But if I come to you and let you know, like really deeply and genuinely, authentically, that, what has come out of the situation, it hurt, it's painful, it's hard, and, you would preference this as an outcome instead. And now you leave it in their hands, and you can tell the person, I will leave it in your hands to decide what you feel is best and what you feel is right and what you feel is just. I just want you to know that I'm hurt. Like, this is very hard for me. And at the end of the day, you can do what you wish to do with this. Any conscious, moral person would stop and pause for a moment and maybe consider offering something. Of course, that's not taking into account that there might be a history there between those two people. There might be more drama, there might be anger and pain and all of these other things. And that requires both parties doing work on themselves at the end of the day. The one who walks away with very little essentially has to make peace with that and maybe make peace with the relationship with that person who passed. And the person that does walk away with more, in some sense, also has to make peace with all of the players in the situation and make peace with themselves for knowing that they walked away with more money or more whatever it is that they were granted. So I don't think life is necessarily fair, but I also don't think that we can necessarily fight for things or create more resistance and fighting in our lives. I think we need to actually do work on ourselves, make peace within ourselves, and be able to communicate with that sense of peace and that clear communication. And that involves having an emotional awareness of yourself and knowing also how to emotionally manage yourself. And this is all emotional intelligence, right? Are you emotionally aware? Can you emotionally manage yourself well enough that you can actually then communicate what you're feeling and leave that person knowing that? And I think that's where a lot of peace can come in, is when you say your piece, when you let someone know how you're feeling. And that's it. That's the most you can do sometimes.
So in those situations where it's really hard, you've tried to communicate and the person's just not responsive, there was a trick that you taught me of what to do in that situation. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Remind me what trick I told you, because I got a bunch of tricks up my sleeve.
Well, this one was interesting because I had mentioned to you like a hypothetical situation where, like if somebody you're trying to get through to them, it's just not working no matter what you do, no matter what you say, it's just not working, right? And in that response, in that case, I was like, what do you do in that kind of situation? And you said something interesting about energetics. So you're kind of bringing it back to the energy of things, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just to give context for everybody to understand, I have a background in holistic health. So what this means is that when we look at any situation, any conflict, any issue in life, I'm not just approaching it from a psychology background or psychology perspective. It's just as much mental, emotional, physical, and energetic. And so there is energy operating around honest all the time. Something very simple for the audience to understand. Think about Wi-Fi. You don't physically see it, but it's operating. It works. You walk into a house, Wi-Fi turns on, it's operating. So it's there in the background, you just don't see it. And energetics operates the exact same way. And so humans share what we call energetic cords between us. And some of these cords can be extremely strong and, let's say, beautiful and light, but other cords can be extremely dense and weak and tethered. And so between human beings, when there is a conflict that takes place, part of what I studied was what we call chakra cording. And so there is a cord between your heart and my heart. And let's say between these two human beings that are having this conflict, or with the will, or in any relationship situation, be it business or be it personal, there is that cord. There's the energetics between their two hearts. And so you can essentially clean up the cord. And so you can go inwards, and I do this with my clients where we go into a deeper unconscious sort of state. You could call it a hypnotic or trance-like state. And you can see and sense what this cord feels like. And you get an idea of the visual and the feeling of the cord. And so based on that, then you can clean it up and, move things around and change it in such a way that makes that cord feel lighter or brighter or more powerful, or that the relationship is stronger, or that there's energy flowing through it again, back and forth, rather than it being stuck or stagnant or paralyzed. And so when you then clean up this cord, you start to notice that the relationship between you and that person can also change. And what may have felt really difficult or stressful or challenging or full of resistance before suddenly feels very light and fluid and easy. Now, I've seen, after doing work like this on a client before, I've seen it literally results within less than 24 hours. Something that, for example, I had a client come to me. She had issues with her colleagues for months, like maybe 8+ months up to a year, that there was just tension all the time. We did a cording exercise. Within 24 hours, she called me back. And she's like, you would not believe it, but my colleague called me and apologized for all the issues of the last 8 months. I was like, wow, that's insane. Like, super fast. Even I was shocked. I've also had it be that, I tell clients, do it every day, because you may not see results within 24 hours. You may need to really work on cleaning the cord and cleaning up the energetics between you and this person. It could be in a couple weeks or in a couple months that you start to see a shift in the relationship. Even investments. I mean, it's hilarious, but I was talking to my investor just yesterday, and this is real estate investment, and he was saying that there's some complications that he's facing with somebody else in the investment that's involved. And of course that impacts everybody. And so I said to him, I'm like, just give me the name of the person and or the company. And I was like, now that I have the visual in my mind, and I'm going to do some cord cleaning for everybody involved, because now that the relationship between all parties involved smoothens and lightens up, now the money can go out the way it's supposed to go out to every partner that's involved in the investment, rather than it being blocked and greedy people in the process. So I already started working on the energetics of this, like how do we sort of minimize greed, and how do we amplify a sense of compassion, understanding, more humanity between people, because that's really what it is. Anytime there's conflict, typically we've removed the humanity of the other person. It's sort of like, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad, what I'm doing is accurate, what you're doing and believing and practicing is not. I care about my needs, I don't care about yours. I'm a human that has needs, you don't. So, we're sort of othering. And when we do that, we, like I said, remove the humanity of that person. It makes it a lot easier to fight with someone. The moment, again, you bring understanding back into the picture, it's a lot a lot easier to smoothen things out and a lot more difficult to be an asshole. Pardon my French.
So, what do you do in the situations where the other person maybe doesn't want to be understanding? Because I mean, that's the real challenge, right? I mean, you can only control yourself. You know, if we're gonna be stoic, you can only control yourself and your own reactions. But is it better to just then like allow things to just kind of fade away, or is it better to like try to keep trying to repair things and like establish that amicable, at least friendship or relationship or whatever it may be, just to like I guess not have to like walk on eggshells or what have you.
Yeah, this is a good one. So I'm of the belief that everybody has a different level of consciousness. I'm trying to look for a visual so I can show this, and maybe I can do it simplistically here. So if we were to look at this, and maybe like on the far end over here, it's like the lowest level of consciousness, and on the far end over here, it's like the most enlightened human being that's walked. And I think we all fall somewhere on this spectrum. And the more work we do on ourselves and personal development and reading and listening to conversations like this, the more we move along this path and become that much more, self-aware, and of course aware of our impact on other human beings. And I think recognizing, I really do believe if people knew better, they would do better. And so I don't want to position someone by saying, well, this human being over here that's more enlightened is better, and this human being that's over here is worse. It's more just a matter of saying, well, maybe I've done a bit more work on myself. Maybe I'm a little bit further along the spectrum of self-awareness, and therefore can't get angry if someone's over here and is blinded. Like, if you don't know, if you're entirely in the dark, you're in the dark, that's what it is. And so for me to fight and resist and push for you to see something that is just not in your reality yet, that your level of consciousness or awareness of self and of your impact on other beings, if it's just not there yet, it's not there yet. And so, again, you can plant a seed. You can share how you feel. You can be as authentic about your emotions as possible. And at that point, you've done your work. The next point is that you need to make peace with what the situation is. And that's it. You've shared, you've communicated, you've verbalized how you feel. Now you need to move forwards emotionally and energetically and make peace with yourself. And I think the rest you sort of have to leave up to, I mean, I guess we could say a very deep sense of belief, hope that that person will at some point be ready to hear what you said. And I think it's so important that we are sharing. We're giving insights, we're planting seeds, we're expressing ourselves to the person calmly, clearly, compassionately. And at some point, again, when they're ready, those words will sink in. What they say, the teacher appears when the student is ready. So at some point, the student will be ready for those teachings. And you can offer the teachings when they're not ready for them. And I think at some point they will sink in. And it will make sense. Kind of like oh, shit, that's what they were talking about. Now I finally get it. And I've had, even myself, I think all of us humans have these moments where, years later, it's like, oh, damn. Like, I did that, or I said that, or, like, that's really what happened. And, I fortunately, I'll just say this, fortunately, I have a very good relationship with most of my ex-partners. And so, it's even years later, I've gotten back to them and just thanked them. Like, wow, that time that I was impatient or just like not receptive or unconscious about this matter, like, thank you so much for holding space for me. You were a gem, and I don't think it's ever too late to say to someone like, you did well. Like, thank you so much. I appreciate you,
That's beautiful. Actually, I'm sure a lot of people are curious as to how you're able to do that. Like, how are you able to always make sure, or maybe always, uh, to make sure that you always have like a good relationship with, the person that you formerly were with, romantically.
There's something that has us take interest in that person to begin with. And I think we develop, some type of, we could call it a friendship with that person, or a deep level of respect, at least at some point. Like, if I chose you for a reason, and there were qualities about you that I liked. And so that doesn't just go away. There may be other qualities I dislike or that are not compatible, but that doesn't mean there's an entire 100% loss of respect for the person. And you can also say, like, I'm processing, because I'm like, how do I want to phrase this? I think oftentimes we intuitively know when someone's not right for us or when they're not aligned. And oftentimes we stay in relationships far longer than we should, almost like squeezing the juice out of it until it literally falls apart. And I would say that actually how you can maintain healthy relationships with your exes is in acknowledging when it isn't in alignment anymore, and saying, I care for you. There is respect here for you. And let's like move in different directions now before it really gets ugly. Like, before we have to finally believe what we already intuitively know now. With all that being said, though, I think when the more self aware we are, the more we are also aware of our values, and we're aware of what is deeply important for us. And therefore, we wouldn't waste our time with someone if those values are not in alignment. So I'm going to give you a very clear example. I work out every day. I have a very clean diet. I really believe in healthy practices. And I also meditate on a regular basis, or I do journaling work or some type of work on myself. So it's just as much physical, mental, emotional, that I'm taking care of myself on a daily basis. I value these things. My health, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health is important for me. If I went out with someone that I felt was like at the very beginning stages of their personal development, or maybe they never even entered into that space, maybe they don't eat healthy, they don't exercise, they've never gone to a coach or never journaled or never done, a meditation in their life, that's okay if they're open to then adapting that lifestyle. In other words, are they open-minded? Are they willing to learn? Do they want to learn? Do they want to grow? Do they want to be the best version of themselves and be healthy overall? Yes? Wonderful. Then we're moving in alignment with each other. No? Great. Then we're not in alignment with each other. And so it's not for me to judge and be like, oh, well, that person doesn't do X, Y, and Z. It's more like, okay, well, it's a fact, right? This is data points. You don't eat healthy? You don't exercise? Okay, well, I do. And I want my partner to do that too, because I want to travel and dance and hike mountains and do all the wonderful things that I would want to do with my partner. And if you're not capable of doing it, well, that's going to be a problem. So it's not about it needing to be dramatic and emotional. It's just about saying, well, we have totally different baseline values. And why don't we call it quits now before we go deeper into it and get angry and resentful with each other? So I think that's another way to just walk away with peace and know, like, at the end of the day, we're not so compatible. It really does come down to compatibility, and it doesn't have to be so personal. And that's that. But again, I think, every partner I've ever chosen, I had a deep respect for on some level or another, and I felt like they all individually taught me something, and I think they deserve to be recognized and acknowledged for that.
I love that. That's actually really beautiful. What about in situations when things are a bit more complicated? Like, so, like, are you a proponent of like stay together for the kids or that type of situation, or what's your take on that?
No.
No.
Oh man, definitely not. No. No, I mean, okay, so here's my thinking, very baseline. If a couple comes to me, so I do a lot of couple therapy as well. I've had couples come to me and I say, listen, I'm going to give you all the keys, all the tools, all the resources for the next 90 days. And both of you are really going to 100% put your best foot forward with all these tools and resources and techniques in the next 90 days. If at the end of these 90 days, you feel like there is still no compatibility, no alignment, there's still a great deal of resistance and frustration and all of these things, then you move your separate ways. If you feel that you've come back and built a new form of connection, beautiful, then we will maintain doing the work together. If after those 90 days, there is still a deep sense of resistance or conflict or whatever it might be, maybe on one end more than the other, maybe one person is more willing than the other, whatever it might be, I do not think that partners should stay together, especially if they have kids. Especially if they have kids. I have seen too many kids suffer because they watch their parents in conflict with each other at home, and I think that is so much more damaging. I would rather that, once the parents separate, they work out their own conflicts on their own, away from their children, rather than bringing that energy into the house and now the kids have to watch it and live around it. And that can be explosive, but that can also be avoidance, right? It's equally damaging to watch your parents totally avoiding each other. So no signs of love, no signs of affection, care, connection, none of that is also damaging, just as much as fighting and, emotional explosiveness and vomiting and all of these things is also damaging. And so, and I think that can have such an effect on the children. So no, I don't think people should stay together for the sake of the kids. I think people should be very intentional about getting the right type of help and being very, devoted again to working things through if they feel it's worth it, if both parties want that. And if at the end of the day they don't want it or it doesn't, realign, then I say, ideally have a peaceful separation and resolve your conflicts away from your children, please.
Yeah, I mean it's still it
Yeah.
definitely still sounds like easier said than done, because like say for example in the case of children, it's like is it is it more damaging in the long run to like not even have like the parents around, for example? Like that also has its drawbacks. So it's like how do you balance that? It's complicated.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you'd have to form some sort of an agreement where ideally, again, both parents are around and both parents are playing a role. And in the most beautiful, ideal sense, the parents actually have a relatively healthy relationship where it's fluid and they can drop in and out and like they're consistent in each other's life, and maybe dad can come to mom's place and mom can go to dad's place, and there is a naturalness. How many divorces I've seen end up like that? Not so common. I have seen it. I have seen couples actually walk away getting a divorce and they're actually so happy afterwards that they have a beautiful dynamic as friends and they really take care of their kids. But of course, not all situations are like that. And sometimes it's the parent, like one parent that chooses to totally disappear or remove themselves. And of course, the other parent can't control that either. At best, they can just explain to their kid that it's not personal and it's not about them. And that, their father or mother has emotions and maybe they don't know the best way how to manage them and they'll come around, hopefully.
Yeah. Wow. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it, communication can get pretty deep and like pretty complicated. And in the case of like business stuff is also another way too, right? So what
Yeah.
happens in situations where like for example you have a business and somebody like cheats you out of something, like maybe you did work for them and then they just don't pay you for whatever reason. What do you do in those types of situations? I know there's like civil courts and everything, but Is it possible to
Yeah.
avoid that situation? Because that's also very expensive, very costly.
Certainly. And I think this is a bit of a difficult situation or difficult, response I can give because I think every relationship is situational. So people, could cheat you out of money because it might be that they felt deeply hurt or betrayed in the relationship, or maybe they felt that there was, again, injustice or unfairness, or maybe that they did more of the work or put more of the time and energy in. There may be a multitude of reasons why somebody could cheat you out of money. And so if you're capable of having that conversation and talking to the person and asking them, like, is there a reason you feel that, like, this money is deserving to be in your hands and not mine? And is there something that we can work through that has it feel fair for both of us? Then, of course, ideally, again, we're not always dealing with the most conscious of people. But I think the first step is to try and understand why someone did what they did to begin with. And if you're capable of having that conversation and asking, and the other person is capable of responding, then that would be beautiful, at least to understand what's going on. But you're right, in some cases, people won't be receptive, they won't be open, they won't want to talk, and in which case you need to bring legalities into things. And with all that being said, again, you can fight, so you can bring law into situations and you can move forward with a fighting energy, or you can move forward with a much more gentle, calm energy. And that requires doing a lot of work on yourself. And of course, again, energetics, you know, cleaning up the cord, cleaning that energy between you and that person. And of course, doing a lot of internal work and cleaning the energy within yourself, because there may be a lot of internal conflict going on, and that's showing up also in your communication, in your body language, in your facial expressions, and all of that. That is not going to necessarily help the situation in business. So yeah, it's not so black and white, but again, first thing to do is try and understand why the person did what they did to begin with, if you're even capable of opening up that conversation and that other person is at least open to discussing on some level. I also think it's very easy to get swept up in other people's anger and other people's bitterness. And I would strongly suggest not bringing yourself down to that emotional level or emotional state. So, if somebody comes at you with a deep sense of anger or resentment, and that you're going to feel that in their tone, I would be very mindful not to match their tone. You maintaining that calmness and that peace. And of course, again, this takes doing work on yourself, maybe meditating or doing a breath work or exercise prior to any sort of serious, hard conversation. So at least you're more grounded. And then approaching the conversation and really aiming to maintain your calm. And it's not always easy. And sometimes you have to catch yourself in the middle and recognize, like, oof, I don't like who I'm being in this conversation. I don't like this tone that I'm showing up with in this conversation. I need to change this now because I'm not going to get the outcome I want. And I think many people need to ask themselves, what is the outcome I want from this conversation? And is this tone and is this delivery and this form of communication going to get it? Yes or no? And being real with yourself too. Like, many people think that fighting their way through things is going to get them the end result, and it won't.
So I heard that you have a book coming out, and you talk a lot about the subjects that we touched on and a lot more. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so my book is based around my 9-key system, and my book is called The Connection Code. And essentially it's walking through all of these 9 keys very clearly and explaining, again, everything from how do we break the ice with people, how do we connect on a much deeper, authentic level with, new people we might be meeting in professional and personal settings, all the way to how do we resolve these really difficult conflicts with the people in our lives. And so knowing how to consciously communicate and how to build meaningful relationships through conscious communication skills. That's really what it is in a nutshell. So I'm very excited once it comes out. It's it's a mix of, maybe we could say, fact and fiction, in that, of course, I share tidbits of my own experiences, tidbits of experiences and things I've, of course, learned through the work I've done with my clients. But I'm also very much a neuroscience nerd, and so I like to back up everything that I do with some sort of research or science, and really explain what's actually going on in the mind, what's going on in the nervous system, what's going on in the body, even right down to our immune system, and how we are all impacting each other. So even just a very simple example, something very interesting that showed up in my research. When human beings are connected, when we spend more time with somebody physically, or even just talking to someone, when we have a deeper connected relationship with someone, if we were to measure your heart rate, you would see that the patterns of your heart pulse actually move in synchronicity with the other person. And so now the wavelengths start to look very much the same. You might start by living with someone, and someone's heart wavelengths might look much more spread out, and somebody else's might look higher and lower. And eventually, with time, they actually start to match each other. And our nervous systems and our immune systems also start to match up. In other words, if you are in an extremely toxic relationship, then you may notice that both of your nervous systems are slowly being eroded and damaged by being together. And if you're in an extremely secure and peaceful relationship, your immune system and your nervous system may be at its strongest. And so it's fascinating how our physical bodies and our physical health entirely pairs up with the person that we spend the most time with, talk the most to, or are most connected with, or even just sharing physical living space with. Which is why, again, it is so important for us to be intentional about who we are letting into our lives and aware of how we are impacting other people's lives. Because literally our health is at stake.
Yeah, wow, that really puts things into perspective, and I'm a big neuroscience fan. Use it on my own clients as well, and it makes a huge difference, like massive difference. And I love how you tied relationships to that, because everything in our life depends on our nervous system. Everything, absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And so to master that can actually put you in the right state to meet the right people. To have a good relationship, or at least to know when you're not in a great one, and what to do with that. So thank you so much, Giovanna. I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. Out of curiosity, do you have any closing remarks? And the last thing is, what does being adaptive mean to you?
Oh, I love this question. Closing remarks. I always say that the quality of your life is based on the quality of your relationships. So I would really encourage you to ask yourself, what are the nature of my relationships? Are they quality relationships? Are they meaningful? Are they deep? Are they connected? Both on a professional and a personal level, with family, with friends, romantically, professionally. Because if you don't feel that those relationships are meaningful and connected and are of quality, then certainly it's going to impact the quality of your life. And in which case, of course, I would encourage working with someone in order to work through those relationships. And adaptive. When I think of the word adaptive, I actually think of something that I always say. For me, the concept of survival of the fittest is all about adaptation. And I think people that actually have, again, quality lives, that actually survive in this rat race of life, this game of life, and not only survive, but again, have a quality life, are thriving in this life, are the people that are the most adapted to any environment, to any person, to any relationship, to any situation. And I think if we know how to adapt and we know how to move in and out of situations with different people in different relationships, I think that's when we are, again, we're not only surviving, but we are thriving. And so when I think of adaptation, I think it's one of the most important skills. And funny enough, it's one of my 9 keys. I call it being fully flexible, but it's all about adaptation. And how do you adapt to your environment and people in a way that has you connect with someone and still obviously not feel that you're losing yourself in the process. So that's
Beautiful.
that for me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Shivana, and hopefully we'll catch
Thank you.
again, potentially in the future. And so with that, we'll bid thee adieu. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you.